and welcome to Pine Island Research Monday night. It is another week gone by. Like I always say, I can't believe how fast these weeks go by. It's a quick weekend. That didn't last long enough, I can tell you that. Appreciate all the feedback we got on this morning's Coffee Time show. It was a great show. We had an opportunity to talk to Brad, co-host over at Wide Open Research with Dr. Russ Jones, and that was a really a good time listening to him share some of their experiences. Got a big crowd in here already tonight. Boy, I tell you, I appreciate you guys choosing Pine Island Research on Monday night here on the Untold Radio Network. I'm not blind to the fact that you got an awful lot of choices out there. And you still chose to join us. So I appreciate that. Welcome to all the people listening on podcast. We are on all the podcast platforms, and we appreciate your support also. Tonight's show is one I've been looking forward to since we scheduled it about 3 weeks ago. And the way that it came about was I was having a conversation with Todd Neiss, a friend of mine who we've had on the show twice in the past. And one night we were talking for several hours about some of his experiences, some of the time that he had spent out in the wilderness in the Pacific Northwest with Ron Morehead, and a few times they were joined by Peter Byrne. And it was just really fun to not only listen to the time that they spent out there, but also I could really tell how much he appreciated Ron's friendship and the time they spent just sitting around the fire that night outside of the RV all the time. And it kind of planted a seed in my head. You know, I wanted to have Ron on as a guest, but I didn't want to do that same typical interview where maybe I ask the same questions he probably gets asked an awful lot, you know. So I thought, how cool would it be to try to create that conversation where we just light the campfire, pour a glass of bourbon, and kick back and listen to these two share their thoughts, share their experiences. And, you know, it won't be your typical type of interview. I think it would be intriguing, and I think it will be fun to listen to these guys because not only are they both well-known in the community, but they're both very well spoken, and they have a true friendship together. So I'm really looking forward to tonight. I'm going to not waste any more time. I'm going to bring them on in. Hey, Ron, how are you doing?
Doing well, Jeff. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. And Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for bringing us on.
I appreciate you guys joining us tonight. I saw you shared some pictures of your new camper that you bought and the new tow vehicle on Facebook today. That looks like you're set up for a heck of a summer, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Doing some traveling, some research, and just have some fun.
You bet. You bet. Well, I saw Ron's interview that he did with Tim Halloran over on the Bigfoot Influencers here on the Untold Radio Network, and talking about your new book, your book that you have out. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I hadn't really heard you speak on it that much until that night. And I got to tell you, I was really impressed, even though there may be some little things that are new to me in the way that you approach this, or your theory on the origin and the existence and some of the challenges we have. You know, commonly asked questions: why are they so hard to photograph? Why are they so hard to see? Things like that. But I got to tell you, I can tell that you put an awful lot of thought, intelligent thought, into arriving kind of at the position that you view it from. And I appreciated that. And so I was really looking forward to getting you on tonight, Ron. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. So let's talk. I'll pull up a picture here. I should have had this already. Let me Let me get the screen set up here. Hold on just 1 second. There. Oh, hold on. There we go. So this is the new book. Tell us a little bit about it, Ron. Tell us about, kind of what led you to want to write the book. And
Well, Al Berry, the investigator we took into the Sierra camp in the 70s, he was a master's degree in science, and he said, stay with science. If you talk about any of the stuff up here, don't talk about the weird stuff. So, but there has to be an answer to everything. And what a lot of people call the paranormal, the woo, and all that, I call basically quantum physics will answer a lot of those questions that people have, and I've been hearing about for years and years. So that kind of inspired me to start looking at how can those things happen that we had happen to us up there. And I mean, we're talking about lights, not just the sounds, but strange lights, strange sounds you couldn't identify, and just stuff, which we can get into later. But that got me into the science of quantum physics because it seems right on the back of classical science, which is Newtonian physics, and it's only a little over 100 years old. That's and I found I tried to get the Einstein, Tesla stuff in there that supports my theories on these anomalies that happen. And a lot of people report them, and a lot of researchers just throw them out with their baby water. But I don't. When you hear so many of them over the years, they don't know each other, but they're saying the same thing. You kind of got to give it a little credence to it. So I think when I found out that the Nobel Prizes have been given out for quantum mechanics, and Dr. Max Planck, he won the Nobel Prize in 1918 for quantum physics, and then was a Dr. Paul Dirac of Florida. He's actually from UK, but he retired in Florida. He won the Nobel Prize in 1933 for antimatter, which means energy and matter are interchangeable. That also supports Einstein's theory, which all that's been supported by CERN in Switzerland in 2012. And matter and energy are interchangeable. So that kind of got me on the quick one. All these people are reporting how they disappear or how the trackways just stop. Well, that's happened to me. And you just don't say that right off the bat without some kind of support behind it. And these things have an expansive vocal mechanism, these Bigfoot, Sasquatch, what you want to call them. According to the studies we've had done on them, they go way above and below and in between everything else in sound, more than humans. And if they could reach the frequency it takes, because everything, according to Tesla, is energy, frequency, and vibration. We, at our most minute level, are energy, frequency, and vibration. That's hard to get your head around, but we think we're just a body running around out here, but there's more to us than that, or less to us than that. I love this stuff, by the way. I'm glad you asked me that question, but he won the Nobel Prize in 1933 for that, and so that would kind of explain if they could reach the frequency that would change their their matter into energy, that would cause them to go out of our visual perception, and it would also change their density, and their density, that means they wouldn't leave a track any longer. And that goes all the way back to Fred Beck at Mount St. Helens, when he said that he followed one trackway. This was before he shot one, supposedly, and he said it would have had to jump 160 feet to have not left another track. So everybody thinks, but we had that happen to us up there, and you don't really talk about that till you got some kind of a professor behind you, because it's like so many things, you don't have some credibility behind it, no one's going to even think about it.
Well, I get where, when you say, well, that's kind of hard to wrap your head around. I know that really is for some people, and, me included, definitely, because, I have to consider how many reports there are of trackways that end, or even single steps or 2 or 3 steps found and nothing else to the trackway. And that's confusing. It's a little perplexing to come up with a natural explanation or a plausible explanation looking at it from a flesh and blood idea that this thing is always existing at that same size, same weight, same frequency, walking in a straight line. How can it leave 3 steps, right? So when I hear you speak on that, I mean, it leaves a lot of question marks in my head, and yet there are things that I can look at and say, well, it would explain this or that, So I think that's where probably a lot of people are the first time around hearing that approach, I would suppose. What kind of feedback have you gotten on the book?
Oh, I
have,
sell a lot of them. I sell them every day. I sell several. And yeah, it's amazing the feedback I'm getting is positive. Or some people have to read it 2 or 3 times because they don't think they get it. But I tried to write it in layman's terms so that people can get it. But are they flesh and blood? It's the big thing that you seem like you're up against. Everybody, well, they're just flesh and blood. Well, I get in a little bit of what we are. We're more than flesh and blood. Nothing is just flesh and blood. Nothing is. We all have consciousness. We have ability to do things. How does remote viewing go? Military's been using that for years and years and years. And how does all this work that we really got? Not just our flesh and blood, but the rest of us, what we are. Our consciousness is mainly, because according to physics too, energy, which we're all made of, like I said before, it can't die. It just changes form. Now, a religious person would say you're going to go to heaven, or maybe not. Where physicists will say you just change forms because energy cannot die. That's your consciousness. So that should give us a little bit of a better feeling about what's going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I mean, when I look at, one of the things I really find perplexing is when I see partial trackways or have seen pictures of partial trackways up here in northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, these areas in the winter where you have snowfall and there's 2 or 3, 4 steps and that's it. I've even seen pictures of a single step. And, when I say flesh and blood, I always am speaking to where I start when I look at something. I'm always assuming that I'm going to start from a flesh and blood approach and looking at the data. And if I can't find that plausible natural explanation, I've got to be open-minded enough to consider something else. And, when you see a partial trackway in the snow, there's going to be people that are going to say, well, it's faked. Well, in the snow, where's the fake footprints? Where's the human footprints that led up to them? I mean, you're stuck at that point saying, what's the plausible natural explanation as I understand it that it could be? And I'm going to find myself in a point where I've got to start considering something that maybe I'm not familiar with, and I think...
Yeah. I think everybody should look into what I'm saying just a little bit before they determine it. They are flesh and blood. There's no doubt about it, but they're not just flesh and blood.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying, because they have a consciousness about them. I believe I put all the dots together to establish that there's a human component to their DNA. You put all the studies that we've had done by Dr. Curlin at Wyoming, University of Wyoming, saying it represented the sounds he studied, which Al Berry recorded. He said it represented an animal 8 foot tall. Well, then you got the cryptolinguist Scott Nelson, who's a 2-time graduate of the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, very well vetted, saying they have a language by the human definition of language. So a morphing stream of words like I'm talking to you right now, and maybe Todd will talk here in a minute, I'm not sure.
Well, I've got some questions for Todd when you're done.
Anyway, what puts the cap on this human component to them is Dr. Lieberman at Brown University, who is a cognitive speech researcher for the monkeys, a primate, mainly the rhesus monkey, but he studied that his whole life. He just passed away last year, but at Brown University, he says only humans have the mechanism in the vocal tract to create sapient language like we have. These things that we had in the Sierra Nevada mountains with the Sierra camp have a language. So you put those 3 things together, Curlin, Nelson, and Lieberman, and that kind of draws it down to 2 + 2 + 2 has got to equal 6. And that means there's a human component there. Now, big question is, how long have they been around? I think my research takes me way back. I think they've been here before Homo sapiens, before we were. And I got into the cuneiform texts, the Anunnaki, the whole bit from the Sumerian all the way through, because I was raised religiously. I'm not religious at all now, but I'm spiritual like we all are, whether we like it or not, we are.
Yeah.
So I go with that, and that's where I kind of go. And Todd knows me. He's been around me long enough to know I just say the way I think. Because I'm 80 years old now, and I really don't care what anybody thinks about me. I just going to say what's happened to me and how I think the conclusions, not necessarily conclusions, but they are not all the same, these Bigfoot creatures. I don't think they are. I think there's multiple amounts of different species been on this planet besides humans. I don't mean animals, I mean aliens. And they've messed with the genome of different species on this planet. And I think they've been coming here a long time before Homo sapiens were created by whoever created us. And that's high frequency beings, by the way, because everything gets into frequency again. And anyway, it goes on to, I could talk all night long all by myself here, but Todd just,
Well, it's
Todd just
interesting.
bursting out wanting to say something.
I would encourage everybody to go out and at least read the book, and you might maybe after reading it you end up in a different position, but at least you're going to allow yourself to look at something that maybe you haven't considered before.
Yeah. Well, quantum science is a science, and it's established science accepted by physicists all over the world. Theoretical physicists are the ones that get into how things work all the way from the micro world through the macro world. I mean, a lot of people, I've been called on a carpet one time, so, well, it's just pseudoscience. It only works in the micro world. Well, no. According to Dr. Christopher Brer, West Texas A&M, it works all the way from the micro world all the way through the cosmos. Everything rides on the back of quantum physics. We in a third dimensional environment live in a third dimensional world where you only see things, and that's all you can believe is what you see, what you can prove out in the three dimensions. But there's so many other dimensions going on, and if you open your mind to conceive that, then like how far is this to the end of the universe? How do you tell somebody that? Well, I've been wondering that since I was a little boy, and no one can answer that. You just have to conceive it and know that it has to be no end. And how do you get your head around that one?
Yeah. I'm curious. I did have on one of the things I wanted to ask tonight was I'm curious as to, and this is something that I want to hear both your replies. We can start with Todd. Ever since the Sierra Sounds were released, I have heard a lot of different what people claim to be recordings. Now, obviously, the Sierra Sounds not only were looked at in a lab, but they were also, like you said, Scott Nelson dissected these, came up with over 600 phonetics that he felt were displayed in the recordings. Have you heard any other audio since those were released that you felt compelled that they displayed something similar to what you recorded and that you felt was authentic?
I did. Years ago, I heard a sound from Ohio, which I forgot who sent it to me, but it was, I thought they had plagiarized some of our sounds. In fact, Al Berry heard it. He said, oh, somebody stole our stuff. So I took the sound graft. I contacted them. They said, no, we didn't. This was made over here, and very credible people. So I thought, well, I looked through every sound that we've ever released that's been out there. We got a lot of them. And I could not find the same signature that matched it. So I could say, yes, I have heard that. I've heard people report that too, but that's the only recording I've really heard that stood up to what I just said. It didn't match anything we had, even though it sounded like the same chattering. And you got all the way going back to Osman too, for Albert Osman in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard that story, I think, where he got kidnapped supposedly and held for 6 days. Well, he said in John Green's book, The Apes Among Us, that they were chattering amongst themselves. And they do. They chatter very rapidly. And you have to really take a hold of that like cryptolinguists did. There's only a few people like Scott Nelson that can do this throughout the world. It's an art form. And again, he's a 2-time graduate of that school. And it puts it all together for me anyway, as far as they do have a human component.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
how about you, Todd?
I'll say this. I have not only experienced some vocalizations myself, some amazing vocalizations, and and not necessarily exactly like what Ron's talking about, but when I talk about vocalizations, I'm talking about patterns. Um, and I'll give you an example in a minute, but I'll tell you, back in 1998, uh, I organized an expedition at the southern base of Saddle Mountain, and was honored to have both Ron and Peter Byrne join the team, and it was there that Ron actually, if I recall correctly, you brought a shoebox full of cassette tapes that were recordings that you and Al had made in the Sierra camp, and I had the privilege of listening to a number of them, and I can tell you, even between the two CDs that Ron has produced, you folks haven't heard anything yet. There's, it probably represents, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably represents less than 10% of all the recordings you've got. Am I correct?
Todd, I've dropped my earpiece twice. I missed half of what you said.
Oh, I was just mentioning that when we were put together that expedition.
Yeah, the trailer, yeah, out there. You set up the
Yeah.
sensitive devices. Yeah, it started snowing on us. Yeah,
Oh,
you remember when I went out and screamed it out and got the reply back? Peter thought
I
somebody was
do.
out there. He thought somebody was out there. One of us was out there, and none of
That
us
was
was out
Peter Byrne was with you that night.
there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for several days. But what I was referring to was that Ron, you had brought a whole box full of cassette tapes, more than a dozen, if I recall correctly. And what you put out publicly in the CDs that you produced probably doesn't even represent a tenth of all the tapes all the recordings that you and Al had done. And I distinctly remember listening to a number of them and commenting. And this is when you only had come out with that first CD. I said, Ron, you got a lot of other good stuff here. I don't even know how you were able to, pick and choose what you're going to put out on that first CD, because there's so much there and so much more than really anybody's ever heard. And maybe sometime Ron will come out with some more of that. But it's absolutely fascinating. But yeah, I do remember, Ron, when Peter and I were inside the trailer, the camper at our base camp, and Ron stepped outside. Was it evening?
Yeah, evening.
I'm trying to remember. Evening, yeah. Stepped outside. He put out a sound and got a response. As I remember Ron turning right back around, because he was pretty much still on the stairs leading from the camper. He goes, "You guys hear that?" And I would later, several days later, have an encounter, a vocal encounter, very, very close range, that I would say by far is the, the most frightened I've ever been when it comes to being in close proximity to these creatures. Um, but getting back to some vocalizations, the last vocalizations, to be honest with you, that I experienced was on the Omaha reservation in Nebraska. I had been invited out there by some tribal members, and was able to get out in their research area along the Missouri River. And I had a real come to Jesus moment, because here was something I experienced that I had put into that supernatural or paranormal category. It's one of those I'd have to see it to believe it moments. And what I'm referring to specifically is this what they call eye shine, this phenomena where They appear to put off light um, uh, from their eyes. I'm not talking about projected light. I'm certain it's reflected light, but amplified just the same because of the temperature in the backs of their eyes. But along with what would at times be one, two, even three individuals in pitch black were these vocalizations. And there's vocalizations and then there's language. I mean, uh, what I'm talking about, language, I'm talking about a pattern, a repeated pattern, because you don't just, you know, make an arbitrary sound and repeat it. If in this one case, we went out very late, I think it was around midnight. It was really the first night we visited this particular area. Um, Again, pitch black. My friend called out in his native language uh, into the darkness, and wasn't more than 20 or 30 seconds before we got some of this eyeshine activity that I've heard about, seen videos of, but to see it in person is just mind blowing. But that first night, from a distance, very loud, came what sounded to me like a female, and I only say that because it was very, very high pitch, really higher than anything I've heard of in the Sierra sounds. But be that as it may, this individual let off what I euphemistically refer to as a verse, a chorus, whatever you want to say, but it was like 6 seconds long. It changed in notes, it changed in volume, it changed in pitch, it changed in rhythm, all within 6 seconds. Then there'd be like a 8 to 10 second delay. I mean, I'm still trying to take in the first verse, if you will, when she does it again.
Hmm.
Same length, same notes, same volume, same everything, perfectly repeated, and way too loud for and too unusual really for any known uh, animal to produce. Well, all in all, within about a minute, she did this repetitiously 4 times, and each and every time they were identical. And 3 days later, during the daylight, I walked out into this area. I wanted to see what this area looked like in the daytime, because all I've been looking at was darkness. I wanted to make sure there were no trails, no other sources of ambient light in the background, and I would find that no, it was like a hillside behind where these creatures were standing and interacting with us. But I'll be darned if she didn't do this again. And this was Wednesday afternoon. And she only did one verse, but she did it identically to what she did 3 nights earlier. And to me, that's a language. This is not arbitrary noise.
So, Todd, are you saying rather than just like varying pitch levels in this, you were actually hearing syllables, like pronunciation points in these vocalizations?
Oh yeah, I mean there's consonants, vowels, whatever you want to call it. But again, that repetition tells me there's a meaning in this individual was putting out. I wish I would have recorded it. And in fact, when I was out there daytime, I thought I had actually captured it on the digital recorder, but as high-tech stuff seems to go sometimes in the field, it failed to work. But it was just amazing, absolutely amazing.
Ron, are you familiar with Shane Carpenter and Randy Harrington in the property? they've got a property called the 400 that they spend an awful lot of time. They found a total of 9 trackways that they have photographed and casted. But this last year, they found themselves out on the property and had recorded, from what I understand, over 10 minutes of audio that displayed several different vocalization styles, from howls to chattering to and the interesting thing about it is this was on a Friday night. The next morning they had left the area and went to a nearby town where they were going to speak at a conference, and they were there at this conference, and it wasn't a big one, but they played what they had captured the night before. And Scott Nelson was there, but he was out in the, in the vendor area. But Scott's son was in listening to this, and he ran out and told his dad, "You've got to get in there and hear this." And he went in and listened to it. And after Randy and Shane were done talking, they played it again for him. And he agreed to take that recording and try to map it against the Sierra sounds to see if there were similar phonetic input, not just one sound, but like 5 or 6 sounds in a row that would, let's say, a phrase, for lack of a better term, that they could compare to the Sierra sounds and see if there's something that's emulated in there. And I was really intrigued because, from what I understand, Scott's only had this recording now for a couple months. But were you aware that recording had been given to Scott, or have you heard it at all? Or
I have not heard it, and no, I wasn't aware of it. But I've been talking to Scott here recently because he and I are speaking together the 1st of April over here in north of here. So I'm going to talk to him about a lot of things when we get there, because he's retired. He doesn't. He doesn't care about much.
Well, someday when I'm retired, I'm going to quit caring about much too. So I just thought it was really kind of almost ironic that the first thing Scott told him is, don't ever play that in another thing until he's done looking at it and deciphering and seeing if he could feel that this was authentic.
I'll ask him. In fact, I might even call him.
But for him to just happen to be there the day after they had captured this.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And one of the interesting things that Scott's capable of is he's not just looking at the pronunciations and the phonetics and whatnot in this recording, but he's able to put it into a bioacoustics lab who has the capability to tell that this one was recorded in a different area than the original Sierra sounds. I suppose that's one thing a lot of people would draw a conclusion. Maybe they just have 10 minutes of the Sierra sounds that nobody's heard before. But, so to authenticate that it was recorded in a different area, different ambient sounds in the background,
that'd be
things
great.
like that.
That'd be great.
So he could separate it as its own representation rather than something that he's comparing it to. But I was really excited about that. And I also have always had that question ever since I first heard the Sierra sounds, was I wonder how much of this they collected, because when you released that, and I heard everything that you've released, it just was natural for me to wonder. I wonder if there was more that he didn't really like Todd said. Did you kind of cherry pick out a good representation of what's there? But who wants to sit there and listen to 12 hours of
right? Yeah, I know we
the
got
same
hours.
thing, right?
Well, think this went on for years up there. I mean, several years.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got hours of it. In fact, all of us were recording. I had my recordings. They all burned up in the fire, unfortunately. But Al Berry's recordings, the ones that would really turn out great that specific night when he had his microphone remoted up above the camp shelter. And but all the guys, Warren's passed away now, but he had a lot of tapes. They were recorded. Bill McDowell, I got copies of a lot of his tapes, but again, they're all redundant. They're the same thing because we all record the same thing. So it's yeah, we got a lot of stuff, but yeah, we did cherry pick them on Al. Al actually wrote that first story with Jonathan Frakes narrating, and I produced it down in Southern California. Then the second CD is I narrated it, as you know, and I put the sounds that where I interacted with them in 1974. So we got a lot of
Ron,
stuff.
what year was it? What year was it that you, Peter, Al, and I think there was a couple others along. I think Blake Deckard doing some filming when we went down to Bluff Creek. Was that 2001?
Oh boy, you asked me to remember something, Todd?
I don't know.
I got a good memory, just not as long as it used to be.
I'm trying to think 2001 or 2002.
Yeah, it was early 2000s.
We stayed at. Yeah,
I've been there four times.
We camped at Bluff Creek, specifically at Louse Camp.
Louse Camp, yeah.
Which is where Roger and Bob stayed back in '67, and we went to the site,
right,
to the very site where that film was made, and
run there with Peter. Yeah, run there with Peter was good because he could tell us what tree was where, because everything's changed down there because of the floods, and he knew certain.
Well, I've got a photograph. I've got a photograph of Peter pointing out a stump on the far bank of the creek that matched that in the film, and
right.
I should have sent that stuff along to you, Jeff, but I don't know if there's a way to add it or not. But anyway, it was a pretty epic trip. I really enjoyed that. We were there a good week or so, I believe.
We were there a while.
We did locate what we believe to be the original site, and did a little bit of filming. And
what time of year was it, Todd, that you were there? You remember if it was spring or
Ron? I could find out if I minimize my screen a little bit.
I was just curious because notoriously the winters are pretty hard. They get a lot of snowfall, and what most people would draw an opinion of what spring looks like. Spring can be pretty wet, pretty sloppy, a little longer than it is in some areas, and so I was just kind of curious when you were there.
I imagine it's the middle of summer because we don't get it rained on, and that creek floods. And in fact, I imagine if you was there right now, you'd be standing under the water.
Yeah, they've got an awful.
Yeah, I do recall we had some pretty good weather. But anyway, that was a great trip, and great to spend some time with Al while he was still with us.
Well, I'm curious, Ron, if I'd love to keep in touch with you and find out what Scott's thoughts were, or if he's gotten that done. And of course, I also want to be respectful to, be respectful to Randy and Shane too. I mean, I don't know what their plan is to do with the recordings or how they plan on releasing that, but in the event, without getting the cart in front of the horse here, if Scott Nelson were to hear those and say there are similarities in some of the phonetics to the Sierra sounds, would you consider at any point releasing more of the sounds that you have, or?
Well, I thought that'd be any good for anybody because we don't know what they're saying.
Sure.
Until you figure out what they're saying.
Sure. Well, I'm trying to put myself in the position of if I had hours upon hours of the recordings and I released, let's say, like Todd says, let's say I released 10% of them, why would I be compelled to release any more? But because really what I would be looking for is somebody to come forward with an audio recording that shows and maps what I've released. I mean, if we can show that somebody else has something that comparable, because I think throughout this community. I mean, when you think of vocalizations, that's the reference point. Everybody always references the Sierra sounds, you know.
That would be great if Scott will do that, if he hasn't done it already, or I don't know where he's at with it, but I'll find out.
Yeah.
Because it would be great cooperation for the whole subject of language. If there's a language,
I think it would just be,
biggest thing he looks for if it's outside the human range, because he knows
Mhm.
he knows the human range, and that's what threw him a little bit on the Ontario sounds, was because they weren't outside the human range, and he couldn't credit them. Even
I think the more you disseminate, even stuff that has yet to come out, to be made public, the better, because there is always a chance that somebody's going to pick up on something that makes more sense to them than perhaps you or Scott, even that might dovetail with something they've heard or recorded too. So,
yeah.
I've had a lot of people tell me they've heard the sound, just like the chatter, everything, just like we recorded, but they don't walk around with a tape recorder.
Well, you know what I find intriguing is usually the times when people reference the Sierra sounds, they're talking about one style of vocalization. Yeah. They'll say, I heard a howl, it was like the ones on the Sierra sounds. Or I heard chattering, it was one like the ones on the Sierra sounds. I think this would be interesting if their recording actually displays several different, for lack of a better term, communication styles in the vocalizations. And if they were to mirror kind of what you hear on the Sierra sounds, that would be huge, because I don't know that I've heard any audio that captures the chatter and a scream, or the chatter and a howl, all the different ranges that are represented in your recordings. There's always, you hear one, or it would just be amazing to have somebody catch audio that displays all the different sounds that the Sierra sounds does. But
well, I think they've got just as almost as varied vocals as humans do. I mean, people try to stereotype these things, and it drives me nuts, because they have, each and every one of them have their own personalities. They are individuals after all. And yeah, people say, "Oh, are they something to fear? Are they nice and benign?" And I say they're all the above. We've got nice folks in our communities, and we've got serial killers.
Yeah.
Anybody can have a bad day, or you might catch one of them with some offspring where they may get defensive, or with a fresh kill where they may want to protect that, but I think it's just too easy to generalize them and how they're going to react under every circumstance. It's just impossible to say.
I think you're right,
Todd. But the vocals are really varied. And a case in point, going back to Omaha, Wednesday night, they understand we're going out between midnight and 2, sometimes even 3 in the morning, and we are the only people out there. And an interesting thing happened on Wednesday night. My friend, who was converted to Mormonism, Native American, very devout Mormon. He said to me, because for whatever reason we were getting some activity, but not nearly as much as we had the previous 2 nights. He goes, I'm going to try something. I've done it only a couple of times, but once in a while I'll get a response. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He says, well, they've gotten to know me over the years, and they know my voice, and they're not afraid of me, and I think to some degree they respect me and my religion. So he said, I'm going to pray with them. I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to ask them. I'm going to invite them to join with us if they're so inclined. And I'm like, okay, why not? So there we are, standing on this road, looking into pitch blackness, and we bow our heads. And just before that he calls out to them, "Ho, Kage!" which means hello, friend. And he says, I'm going to talk with our Creator, and I'm going to ask for His blessing on you and your people, and for your happiness and health. And, if you would like to join us, Gigaho, which means come closer. And then at that, he bowed his head. We bowed our head. We're sitting there, and the prayer itself was in English. But he had mentioned that at times he had been able to draw them in a little bit under those circumstances, at least on 2 previous occasions. And he got about halfway through a 3-minute prayer. I mean, maybe so like 90 seconds into this, very nice prayer. And all of a sudden, from I don't know, my 2 o'clock, and I'm telling you, where they were normally like 100 to 120 feet away, I'm telling you, this was between 50 and 60 feet away now. We got this, and Ron, you've heard the whoop sounds that they make, right? The whoop, whoop, right? This thing let out 4 very loud, very close range whoops, if you will. I'm not going to hurt my lungs demonstrating, but bottom line is, I was all I could do not to look up. And this is completely different than the sing-song thing we had heard Monday earlier that day. All different individuals, different intonation, different inflection. But I just was waiting for my friend to say amen, and as soon as he did, I looked at it and kind of elbowed him. I go, "Is that what I think? What I think it was?" He goes, "Yeah. It came in. I told you, sometimes it happens." But again, a whole different vocal, different voice. To be honest with you, it wasn't just a different. I don't know if it was the same language or not, or what have you, but different. A different situation and a different individual with a whole different voice. But it was amazing, absolutely.
Wow.
Amazing.
I recorded the whooping sounds up there in '74. The night I really got to see one, actually, and that's they got different types of whooping sounds, different intonations to them. And I think my theory is that they're giving a code of some kind to another one. I think it's a method of communication, but depending on what intonation the whoop has, depends on what they're trying to tell another one. Because they're never by themselves, I don't think, or rarely.
Yeah.
And they could be whooping back and forth, which we had that happen up there. And I was fortunate enough to get my little cassette recorder out of my saddlebag and get it recorded. That's another story.
You had mentioned something last week to Tim about when you were up in Alaska and they were recording for a show, and their intention was to go out and call blast some of the Sierra sounds, and you had made the comment, "I don't know if that's a great idea." And it kind of made me, I've said that a lot when people talk about wood knocking. You hear people say, "Well, if you knock 2 times followed by 3 times, it means," you may have seen that happen twice in your area. I don't know if that's any proof that geographically all over they all follow that rule, so to speak. But you had a great point. I mean, if I didn't know how to speak Chinese, but I just started trying to make it up, and I'm talking to Jackie Chan, how do I not know if I just asked him if he wants to fight? I mean, I don't want to do that, right? So when people are trying to call blast these sounds, you really don't know what the sounds are. You're speaking a language you don't understand, and I don't think that's really a safe scenario.
No, I had, you know who Tom Cantrell is?
Yeah.
Yeah, his son-in-law, I think it was, who blasted my sounds, and it brought one of them in crashing through the trees. They saw it, and that made him walk on water pretty quick. But,
I would imagine.
but you don't know what they're saying. They might be, you may be challenging them. You might they might
Might
be
be a
looking
mating call.
a mating call. That would be a.
That wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be good.
Ron, I don't know if
Yeah.
you spoke with Kyle Gibson, but he did the same thing with your recordings several years ago out on Lake Roosevelt. He had one of these, wakeboard boats with the big, racks with
Speaker
the
towers
giant
on them.
speakers on them and whatnot. And just for fun, they happened to have your CD with them. They went over to the Coville side of the river, the north side of the lake, where there's a ginormous granite mountain, and they cranked it up. Him and his former wife, they cranked it up, shot it up into the cliffs there, and turned it off, and they got a response, but it was like 3 draws away from where they were at, what they estimated. And Kyle said, "Take me to shore." So his wife took him to shore. He got off onto the beach, and by the time his feet hit the beach, he heard it again, and this time it's only 2 draws away. And she backs the boat offshore a little bit, and he starts walking toward the vocalization. And Kyle's not a small guy. He's a former MMA fighter, and he gets over there. About the time he gets right next to the rocks, this thing was standing right above him on a cliff, and it scared him to death. And he started going back to the boat, and this thing took chase. And this is all based off of the.
It's the same story. You're telling the same story I just told. Just
where he's walking on water.
Yeah.
You didn't say Kyle.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know. I couldn't remember his name. I just thought it was
son-in-law. Oh yeah, his wife said he was walking on water to get out to that boat to get away from this thing. But yeah,
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's better. You told it better than I did.
I can.
Well, Todd kind of told the prequel. He kind of led all the way up to it. So.
Well, again, going back to 1998, you remember you had flown your Cessna Bushmaster into Seaside, and we were hoping to use that for aerial surveillance, but the weather was so socked in, it wasn't worth it. And I think it was on about day 6 where you asked Peter if he'd drive you back down to Seaside, which is a good half hour, 45-minute drive back, so that you could fly out under some decent VFR. And while you guys were gone, I was the only one there at camp, and I decided to go up the hill above our base camp and place these seismic ground sensors that would detect vibration in the ground, footfalls, very sensitive equipment. They use them around nuclear facilities and other high security places. And I'd gone up the hill above base camp. I got about 3 of these in the ground, and this hailstorm moved in. And I looked down at the base camp, which was a good, 300 yards away, and I'm like, I'm not going to make it back down there by the time this hailstorm gets this way, because it was actually going to pass the base camp first. But so I just went up into the old growth trees. These trees have never been cut, and I used them as an umbrella. And I'm sure I've told you the story, but I was standing under these trees, waiting for this short-lived hailstorm to pass by, and I had to answer the call of nature, which I did, and just peed, got my belt buckle. I was just about ready to was cinching up my belt when at my 10 or 11 o'clock, I got roared at from something maybe 70 or 80 feet away. And it was hiding behind a hedge of salal and Scotch broom. It didn't show itself, but in talking with Kyle, he experienced the same thing that I did. I was, some people might call it zapped. I hear that. I hate that word, but I mean, I was paralyzed with fear. I could not move for 2 minutes. My hands remained on my belt buckle, and I was staring in that direction, and I felt I was hooked to a car battery, which I assumed was adrenaline. But when I talked to Kyle about that situation where he played your recordings, he was the same way. He froze in fear, and he said he was stuck there for well over a minute before he made a break for that boat.
Wow.
But anyway.
I'm going to play something here real quick, guys, just for a minute, a little intermission piece. It's about a minute long. And then I have a couple questions we've gotten from the chat that I'm going to bring forward. So just give me a second here.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
All right, so Caillou Ninja Tristan wants to know if you were able to hear or record more sounds after the 70s in the Sierras.
No, I haven't. Really, I haven't been up there since 2018 when David Paulides filmed us up there. We was in there for a week doing that Missing 401 The Hunted. And prior to that, I'd been trying to go up as often as I could, but I moved up to Washington in 2008, I think it was. And it's a little bit of a trip to get down there.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't have your own horses, which that means you got to walk in. And walking is not what I like to do nowadays. It's just not.
It ain't the same as it was in the 70s, is it?
No, you can do everything you used to do almost, but it's not near as fast.
I was going to say, going down the hill don't feel quite that much different, but going up it sure does.
Well, it depends if you fall and roll, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Also, Pete H asks, he says the language is one thing, but the light sources that you've seen with that is amazing. Have you ever, other than that location this year, ever seen either of you when you guys are out, seen anything that would commonly be referred to as orbs? Or I know the light sources you saw were more longer, like cylindrical, almost horizontally cylindrical. But have you ever seen that anywhere else?
I have. Have you, Todd?
I have not seen what people refer to as orbs, and I've gone into areas where they swear up and down that they're there, or that they have seen them there, but I personally have not witnessed that. No.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one time the guy calls me out. We had radios. I had a radio in my tent. He had a radio in his tent. I said, if anything happens, hit the radio. And he hit the radio. We come outside, and I won't use his name for obvious reasons. But he's like, right there. And we're in this little grove of trees. He's pointing up between the trees. But you see that light there, that bright light there? That's one right there. And I said, well, let's walk outside of this little grove of trees. Keep our eye on it. We got out there like, yeah, that'd be Mars. I think, I don't know, but he kind of, in talking with him beforehand, he said these orbs would drift through his camp and right through that grove and out the other side and change color and all kinds of things. Personally, I haven't seen it.
Tell you where you can see them if you ever want to watch them. Is go up to Joe Hauser's Montana Vortex.
I've been there.
Okay, go outside at night with a camera and just point it in the woods. Make sure your lens is clear. There's nothing going on. Take a picture and then look at it. There'll be orbs in it. Your camera's lens will pick up more than what your eyes will. So we only see between 430 and 770 terahertz. That's our light frequency. And yet there's all these other frequencies out there which we don't see. And the camera's eye will pick up more than your eye will.
Sure.
A lot of animals see more than we do too.
Yeah.
But I took a picture of an orb up there one time, and I took it back and blew it up and looked at it, and it had a design inside of it. It looked like a Mayan calendar or something. And I thought, well, what in the world? Because I do believe they're a form of energy, and I think at least that elongated light that we saw up there at the Sierra Camp in 2016 that David Pilates recreated in his film in 2018. It was probably about 3 to 4 foot long and just glowing and just moving through the trees up there, and definitely controlled. What do you do with that? We watched it for a long time till it went out of sight. Don't know what it's all about, what it's doing. The Johnson brothers in the 70s, when Bigfoot was going on up there, claimed, and they're not fooling around. They're serious guys. They said these orbs were falling around above their heads up there while they were walking around camp at night. And I seen a UFO up there once. That's what I'll say. A big blue ball coming down from the sky, definitely control, coming slow, and we lost it behind the trees. But at the same time, the Bigfoot stuff was going on. So there's something else going on around these things. I think if you get into quantum physics, you can maybe match it up with some of the paranormal, quote unquote, stuff that some people witness.
Wanted to say thank you, Uncle Bones, for the super sticker. That one thing you just mentioned kind of led me to, when somebody works with somebody else who's portraying something, I guess that's a question that I would have is what David Pilates did with Missing 411, The Hunted. Those kind of recreations, the way that the orb almost looks like a fluorescent shop light shape, the way that it moves horizontally. When you watch that, do you feel that was a pretty accurate representation of what happened there? I mean, you don't look at it and say, oh, I don't know if it portrays this well or that.
No, I actually stood where I stood, obviously, and pointed the way it moved and the speed, and the speed in which it went. And they portrayed it perfectly.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought it looked great. And so did Carrie. She was there too.
Well, I think that's kind of a neat thing to hear for viewers and listeners here, is because, for those who have seen it, I suppose they look at that and think, I wonder if this is, Hollywoodized a little bit or whatever, or is this really a something that you would feel was an accurate recreation of it? And that's interesting to hear.
Well, Jeff, I'd have to say, just if I may, for the longest time, I have played the very skeptical, very biological, flesh and blood, if you will, stance on this issue. And for me, when I hear somebody say, I witnessed this particular species do this particular activity or exhibit this particular trait, my first go-to is to find, locate, identify any other sort of known animal that may have that capability. And when it came down to this eye shine, for instance, thing, I can't unsee what I saw. So now I was put in a position to really kind of stand on that third rail between science, at least established science, and supernatural, paranormal, pseudoscience, whatever you want to call it, and kind of risk my reputation in the process. But it's like Ron says, if this was some anecdotal, one person said this kind of thing, you'd go, that looks kind of interesting. But it's not. It's dozens, if not hundreds of people seeing things that, there has to be an answer. There's always truth in any story or legend for that matter, or experience. And so what I've tried to do in the last year and a half or so is stand on that third rail and go, okay, um, I'm still not divorcing myself from this flesh and blood biological creature. And at the same time, I'm willing to accept over here that somebody or some people have experienced something. Is there some way to meet in the middle? I mean, is there some way to explain it? And I've come up with some interesting theories in the process. Uh, but like I say, this isn't onesie twosie stuff. This is like a lot of people and
Yeah.
unrelated people. So in the case of the eye shine, I've done a few experiments and I've got some theories with regards to how, it's no big secret that animals that have night vision, and you think of, your mind immediately goes to felines. They have this tapetum in the back of their uh, retina, between the retina and the optic nerve, that literally takes in light. And this may be light that you or I, as humans, are limited. You talked about terahertz in terms of light, Ron, and that we are limited in what we can detect. But there's always light out there, whether it's zodiac light or lunar light or what have you. Now, how they see at night is that light gets pulled into the eye, it reflects off of that tapetum, and it goes back through the eyeball, thereby multiplying it and giving them that night vision. Now, we could talk about a cat's eye that might be a little bit bigger than ours or about the size of ours. Now take that same eye, let's extrapolate it out to an eyeball that's the size of a tangerine. Looks like a camera, a lens. The larger the lens, the more light it pulls in, and the more light it's going to put out. And so, I mean, you can go as big as a beach ball if you want, but the bottom line, I think you follow that the more light you're able to bring in, the more light you're able to amplify and maybe rise it to the level to where now we can detect something because of how that light was treated within the eyeball.
Yeah.
Another thing I've been working on, and Ron alluded to it earlier, was what appears to be, or I should say disappears to be Bigfoot. And again, um, too many stories, just too many stories of something appeared out of nowhere and then seemingly vanished into nowhere. Now, this obviously won't account for any trackways that end up being limited, but one of the things I've been doing, experimenting with, and again, going back to, do we have any sort of known species that is able to have some sort of camouflage uh, potential that would account for this? And one of the interesting things I found out was um, polar bears. Guess what? They literally are not white.
Yeah.
You go, how can you say that? Well, the fact is that other than their base hair, in fact, their skin, by the way, is black, jet black. Their main fur is an off-white, tannish color, but they have guard hairs which extend beyond the main coat.
Yeah.
And not only they're hollow, they're like fiber optics, if you will. They draw in the light, the ambient light and colors around them. And not only that, they serve another purpose in that they pull in thermal heat and transfer it down into the base coat. So I've been experimenting with fiber optics. I've bought 1,000 feet of fiber optic wire, if you will, um, and I'm experimenting with different types of fur to see if I can't take photographs of these fur samples in specific location under specific lighting conditions, obviously in the forest, and then come back and infuse these fiber optic hairs, if you will, into the fur, take it back under the same circumstances, same location, same lighting, and see if it will literally take in the ambient, the surrounding light and color of its surroundings, and make it, basically blur it out, where it's, especially if they're not moving, but where it's hard for them to be seen. So, again, saying, hey, yeah, I believe you saw something. It seemed to disappear or appear or disappear. I don't doubt that was your experience. The only thing I question is your particular assessment as to how that was caused, your interpretation of it. So I think these are the kinds of things that we need to, kind of step outside the box and apply more modern technology and see if we can't figure it out.
I agree. Polar bear hairs are, like several animals that have been identified, are completely lacking, almost completely lacking a medulla core, which really does physically make them emulate a fiber optic cable. And what people don't understand, it's not the front curvature of the hair. If you were to look at a single hair, let's say from the side, it's not that front curvature that's making it's the reflective back curvature a lot of times that is projecting out the light that it's taken in. That doesn't mean you can put a polar bear on a fluorescent blue or a bright blue surface and it will look blue. But it does explain why a polar bear could stand on a gray looking iceberg and completely melt in, and also stand in freshly fallen pure white snow and completely blend in. I mean, it is able to pull in that surrounding and emulate it to an extent. I was asked here in chat, somebody had asked to ask Todd if he's working on a project with Discovery. And if you're able to talk about it, if you are, maybe you aren't able to talk about it.
I have a non-disclosure agreement that kind of prevents me from talking about it.
Sure, okay.
I understand. I guess I can go so far as to say that I've been working for nearly a year and a half with a production company to put together a new TV series on the subject of Bigfoot, and it looks like we're getting some traction and getting some attention.
Well, I certainly understand the limitations of an NDA. I mean, you can acknowledge that something's in place or something is in the works, but oftentimes the details of it just, it's not that you don't want to talk about it, you just can't. So I get that. I am kind of curious a little bit about the first time you guys, maybe Todd can tell us quickly how you guys met, and maybe Ron can talk about the first time you guys actually went out, in a remote area and actually spent some time together looking into the Bigfoot mystery. I mean, how did this all start, your guys' friendship?
Well, I think it was prison, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had your back.
Yeah, right.
He owed you some ramen noodles or something like that.
Hey, if they ask you for your sandwich, give it to them.
Right. Now, I was just thinking about that, Ron, because I know we've known each other for a couple of decades anyway, and we've hosted each other in each other's homes. We even spent time in the British Virgin Islands for a week cruising together and done a lot of fun things. I've been down to your place in Mariposa a few times back in the day.
But we was out on that ship in Canada for a week, up there in the.
Well, that's true. Yeah, Operation Sea Monkey. But I mean, when was the first time we met? And I
think we're not on it. I don't know when we met, but when we first went out together, I think it was in that trailer when you took us to that site where you.
98.
Yeah, 98. But we knew each other before that. I produced the sounds in 96, the first CD, and Matt Moneymaker had.
That was actually cassette tape.
Huh?
that first recording was on cassette, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
The original Sierra Sounds. And then you converted it to CD. Anyway.
Whatever. We took them out in the
public. I have it somewhere around here. Anyway. Were you ever at Harrison Hot Springs?
I've been there, but not with John Green.
Okay, it's just like 96, 7, 8, and 9. I was a speaker at Harrison Hot Springs, and I met a lot of people like Renee and Krantz and Green and Finnernagle and all that there. Tom Seymour, but I couldn't remember if you were there or not.
Too bad about John.
It was 98. Yeah.
Yeah, 98 when we first started going out together. You had heard my sounds and you wanted a recording guy there. And I said, I'm not a recording guy. Just, I experienced them. So I went there with my recorder. But by the way, I'd like to say, you guys know who Edgar Mitchell was? Astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell?
Yeah.
Jeff, do you?
I don't know who he is, but I recognize the name.
Yeah, he was an astronaut, a doctor who walked his sixth person walk on the moon.
Okay.
He said it takes classical and quantum sciences together to have clear perception. Got to think about that a minute. Because if you just use Newtonian physics alone with 1687, you're working with just in our third dimension. So when you see something strange, just keep your mind open to it, because there's more things going on all around us all the time that we don't see or hear or smell. We can't smell like a bear does. We can't see probably like a Bigfoot. But we only see within frequencies. And I changed the subject, I guess, a little bit. But that brought to my attention when you're saying it's just flesh and blood. But you can put those together, I think, Todd, because they're flesh and blood. But when they're in our environment, they can be shot, they heat, they poop, they procreate, they do everything we do. And they like it here. And I think they've been here longer than we have, some of them. I also think there's a hybridization program going on. They've crossbred with indigenous people, making some of them much more human-like than others. Some of them may have lost their certain attributes from crossbreeding with humans, which means they had 23 pairs of chromosomes, which is another thing that brings them into the human component. Anyway,
Well, there certainly has to be somewhat of a plausible explanation as to why there are physical differences in the descriptives that people describe. I mean, many of the skunk ape or Sasquatch descriptions in Florida and Louisiana are different than the ones you will often hear about from Saskatchewan or the Pacific Northwest. Hair length, shape of the face, the definition in the nose is often different. And it just makes me realize how, even height differences that, if you took what we identify as a human, if you took an Aborigine and showed him the first time somebody that looks like Shaquille O'Neal, I don't think either of them would recognize each other as being humans. They look so different from each other. And so, there has to be an explanation as to why there are differences in these appearances. And that certainly would be one possibility, is that there was, some breeding that went on that would obviously change the physical appearance to some extent. But
well, if you travel the world, I know, Ron, you've done extensive travel. On a smaller micro scale, you can sit at a mall and watch the people go by, or even worse, go to plant yourself in a Walmart, and you're going to see all kinds of different people, all different types of. It's a freak show. But bottom line is, I think they are, again, going not just back to personality, but to body size, to coloration. I don't think it's all that surprising that a species like this is going to have all kinds of different looks to it, different sizes, and it might be uh, localized. It could be um, uh, regional, if you will. But I think they're as varied as you and I. And I've seen so many different, like you say, different facial characteristics, different hair colors, different hair lengths, different body styles. It's. I don't think so that's surprising because if they're that closely related to humans, then certainly they're going to have that sort of dimorphism that we humans have as well.
Maybe.
Just my opinion.
You had mentioned something earlier, Todd, when I think you were replying to one of the things we were talking about by using the idea that when you're looking and trying to come up with an explanation to something, you're looking for a natural explanation, or maybe I don't know if that's exactly the word you use, but really the way that applies is natural as I understand natural to be, which can vary person to person depending on the viewpoints that people have on the subject. But also, we got to look at our own species. We're still learning about humans every year. I mean, there are things that we realize that we thought we understood about our own species 50 years ago and realize now that's not the case, that there's a different explanation as to how that's processed, or you know so when you consider how much we're still learning about ourselves and still learning more and more and more about known species, we're looking at this subject, and yet we're supposed to come to this idea that natural applies the same way to everything by everybody, and that's really not true. Um, when I say I take a flesh and blood approach and look for a natural explanation when I see something, I go through the options. Maybe I look trying to arrive at what's the most plausible explanation for what I'm seeing or analyzing here. I may discount the two least likely. I don't throw them away. I discount. I just set them aside. And then I get that down to two or three explanations that maybe it could be, and I try to come up with the most plausible one. If I find myself in the position where none of them fit, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going a supernatural route. I may still be going a natural route. It's just I don't understand it to be natural, but in fact, it may be.
It's Occam's razor, if you know what I mean. It's the simplest explanation may very well be the best explanation.
That's true.
I think we all have to look for the first obvious thing, and like you say, just well said, Jeff. What you said. We have to look. We have to look for the natural. What could that be? I don't just go by one thing. We had several things happening to us up there, and I know it's a lot of people think, well, they're interpreting it wrong, but I know a lot of people think that way, and but how do you misinterpret when you got five of us in the shelter? We hear our camp being tore apart out there. You think some bears ripping our barrels off the trees and throwing all our stuff around. You look out there later, nothing's changed. How do you explain that?
Yeah.
How do you explain the lights that we seen? Uh, there's just when you get to the bottom of the barrel, you can't find any more explanation. You have to think, well, there's something. I don't even like to say metaphysical, but there is something. I try in my program to bridge that gap between the physical and the metaphysical, because I don't think there has to be a gap. I think we all have abilities within us. We have not evolved like we're going to, like we got to. We have to evolve into stopping killing people, stop warring. We got to evolve into a better planet, a better race, a better species. We're a warring species, and we're always hurting each other and stuff like that. And we got to stop doing that stuff if we're ever going to evolve, because you don't evolve by negativity.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is that we need, and I think we'd be on the same page, Ron, you and I, and Jeff for that matter, that we need to take supernatural and make it natural. and it's a very fine line, okay? Because supernatural just means it's something that we don't understand, such as, the quantum physics and all that. But we need to take paranormal and try to make it normal. To just realize that just because we don't understand something doesn't mean it isn't normal or it isn't
That's
natural.
so right. That's so right. So right, Todd. Like what Tesla said, he said it was quantum physics. I'm just saying that supernatural is not supernatural, it's just something we got to understand. And is it supernatural or is it, and what's the law behind it? Is all I'm saying. Quantum physics is the law existing throughout the universe, within us, all the way through the cosmos. It exists, and we have to understand that that's within us all. We have everything within us if we just put it together, and that's all I try to do with my book.
Sure.
I
I think the one thing that we all can agree on for sure is that we're talking about a subject in which we have very little facts that we can base anything on. We have to look at things and try to establish a theory or a hypothesis to explain what people are seeing, what people are experiencing, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And I'm always very careful not to present any of my ideas as facts. And I feel like that's a huge disservice when I see so many channels out there talking about, if it knocks on a tree 4 times followed by 3 times, you better run like hell, because this is what it means. And it's like, dude, that's not a fact. We're for somebody who's starting their journey in this thing. I mean, we've been at this a long time, but somebody who's starting to try to educate themselves, here's these people presenting their thoughts and ideas as facts. It really does a disservice. But that's why I say, Ron, you've thought this out, you put a lot of thought into it, and that rings clearly in your book, and it rings clearly when somebody listens to you speak about it. Even if they don't arrive at the same conclusion or the same perception as you do on something, you certainly don't come off as somebody who's just throwing rhetoric out as an idea. You've put an awful lot of thought into arriving where you're at.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate that. But one of the comments a friend of mine threw up in the chat, he says, whatever, Jeff, he says, I'm all for it. Let's throw stuff against the wall, see what sticks. Well, we don't, excuse me, we don't have many facts to throw against the wall that we know are going to stick. We're trying to come up with these ideas and explanations and a hypothesis that seems to plausibly explain much of what we are seeing shared in thousands upon thousands of encounters that start drawing consistencies that we can look at and identify. And if we aren't willing to open our minds up and have a discussion on what we may or may not be looking at, we aren't going to get very far. That's kind of the approach that I try to take at it. Just because it hasn't happened to me certainly doesn't mean it couldn't happen to you.
That's another thing. I think somebody has to have something like that happen to them before they are ever going to buy into it, and start wondering how that happened. I had so many people come to me and tell me this happened, that happened, strange stuff. They don't want to talk about it because somebody's going to laugh at them or something. But they'll tell me because they know I'm into it and trying to understand them. I had these people tell me they saw one disappear in Alaska 20 years ago. I threw him, no, nothing can just disappear. Well, yeah, maybe they can if they can change their matter into energy and vice versa through frequency. Everything is frequency. We are frequency. Even Einstein said if you can find the frequency of anything, you can change its matter. Well, I think that's how our masters, Christ, let's put it that way, he did his miracles through quantum physics, in my opinion. We can do the same thing he did, he said. So we're not walking on water yet. I haven't learned how to change wine into water into wine. How's it go? Something like that.
Boy, if I could learn how to change water into wine, we'd be saving some money around this house.
I'd like to have them drink right now.
Well, and I know how much you like your wine, Ron. So
So, Ron, you're out on the East Coast, out in the Carolinas now,
I
right?
am now. Yes, I am.
And Todd, you're still out in the Pacific Northwest. You guys got anything on the horizon planned for the coming year? Anytime you guys are going to be spending together or seeing each other? Or...
But Todd just loaned me his car here a while back. You know, that's a friend. When they give you a sports car, let you drive around for a week or two.
Yeah.
That's
He had the Porsche, man.
I know. Nothing wrong with that.
Me and Todd have been working on a meetup point.
Yeah.
Doug built him a new bike. You know, Doug's
I've heard about
passion, he
that.
lives and breathes, is building the best e-bike money could buy.
And Doug, I know you're out there, so I'm just gonna put this plug in for you.
Oh, there you go.
and it's all
oh wow, look at that. So
but
we
yeah,
were talking about picking up his bike, and I said, you know, that might be an opportunity for us to hang out a little bit if you got to come here to get it. Because Doug is very particular about shipping a bike that he built. He does not want you to ship that bike.
You know, can we meet halfway? Like maybe we meet in Montana.
Or Jackson Hole or something.
I'll promise I'll put it inside the trailer. I promise. I'll wrap it in bubble plastic.
Bubble wrap.
Yeah.
Well, I got conferences lined up this year, but most of them are out here. I'm probably going to go out there in the West Coast sometime this summer. I got plans to, but I don't know what day yet.
Yeah.
But I got the conference here on the 1st of April, then another one down in Florida, and the 23rd of April, I think it is. And I got one in May somewhere, and then I got another one in Nashville here later in the year. I forget, but it's a fun thing to do. But I don't like traveling. I just like to be there.
Yeah.
I agree.
So much nicer.
Let me ask you this, Ron, because you've been doing this an awful long time. I'm wondering if this is still something that you really enjoy, and that's when it comes to a conference, and I've heard Doug say this so many times, it's really not about the 45 minutes or an hour that you get up and speak and share your ideas. It's nice to be able to do that, but it's those 6 or 8 hours afterwards where people are coming up to you saying, Ron, can I tell you about something that happened to me? I could sit there all day long and listen to that stuff.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what happens. You're doing that all day long. I mean, it's not 6 or 8 hours. It's the whole till they close the doors.
Sure.
And everybody wants to tell you their story, and that's okay. But you know, when there's 2 or 3 other people standing behind them waiting to tell you their story.
Yeah. You got to give me the Cliff Note version, not the 1 hour version.
All you want to do is sit down. But yeah, it's I spent some time with Doug when he picked me up, took me to a conference somewhere here a year or 2 ago, and we had quite a bit of time to talk, and he knows what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well, as for me, I've kind of the last 18 months, I've probably done about 10 different conferences and some documentaries. In fact, there's a TV series coming out. Well, it actually came out yesterday in Canada, and it's supposed to premiere, I want to say April 24th, maybe on Discovery Plus. But no, they flew me back to New York to do an episode on that. But I've kind of backed off the whole speaking circuit because of knowing that this TV series is starting to come together and not knowing what the shooting schedule is going to be. I think I'm booked once in Texas after my Beachfoot conference that I put on in late June. But other than that, I'm just kind of playing it by ear.
I found out. Can I suggest something? Do it all. Just do it all. Don't hold your breath with these production companies. They'll hit you up and hold you up. And I was advised by a guy that said 23 of them, a great shark hunter, and he said, don't hold your breath on those things. Just go about everything you're doing. They will make time out for you to go to that conference. They'll just not do it that day. And that's
Yeah. Well, again, I haven't completely, I know it might sound silly, but I just gave a class to outdoor school, a couple, about 30 minutes from here. It's third year that I've talked to these 7th and 8th graders about Bigfoot while they're at outdoor school, and I've done other classes, another three with the Audubon Society's education department, with taking kids out in the woods. And
I read on Facebook when you shared that, and I thought, how cool would that be? That, 7th and 8th graders, their minds are ready to go on any adventure they can find to be able to talk to them about this.
It is amazing, and something I wasn't prepared for, because I was always raised with doing hiking, camping, and all that. Was this is a whole different generation, and when you take inner city kids who've never spent one night in the woods in their life, you drag them up into the mountains. In this case, it was up by Skookum Meadows, and we build a big bonfire. They're coming up in a school bus, and guess what, kids? You're out of cell phone range, and it's like, oh my god! And no Xbox and all that, and they're forced to sit around a campfire. And my favorite part of that was just to step back, just out of the firelight, and watch these kids' eyes with just being transfixed on this bonfire and not saying a word.
Mm-hmm.
That, and it brought so much back to me, flooding back to me, and the first times I ever sat around a campfire, and even to this day, how much I just love doing that. But this was the first time for them. It was like they were like little, campfire virgins, and all of a sudden, you just get to watch this expression where they're like, "Oh my god," But it's a lot of fun, and the Conservancy, the American Primate Conservancy, is founded on science and education, and that working with the kids, whether it's Cub Scouts or the Audubon Society or the outdoor school, that kind of fulfills that educational component, and I love doing it. I just love doing it to get kids to plant a seed in their mind that, you know what, guys, not everything that exists out there is going to be taught to you. There are more things out there, and it's an open door for you to go out and do your own discovery and find things that nobody's ever found, and it's fun. It's just fun.
Well, it's just so neat this generation, once they lose a cell signal, that's as close as they're probably ever going to be to a PTSD-inducing moment, So, to see them get into and be entertained and be, fully vested mentally into a discussion like that, I think is something that they can really grow from, even if it's just sparking an intrigue in the outdoors rather than, Bigfoot or anything else, just getting them out of their element. I think that's awesome. When you shared that on Facebook, I really appreciated that. So,
me too. Good job, Todd.
Well, I'll tell you guys.
Rewarding.
We got one last question here from Tristan. He says, does Todd and Ron think there are other cryptids out there than Bigfoot?
Absolutely.
I do. And that's because I believe in aliens, and I believe that there's different ones been playing around with the genomes of different species on this planet. Why not play with a dog? I've heard so many people say they've seen them, especially over here in the East. A lot of people say they see them here. And it surprised me for a while, but anymore, too many people are saying they see them. And if aliens can mess around with the genome of a troglodyte and create a Bigfoot, or if an alien can mess around with the troglodyte and create us and give us certain features that other animals wouldn't have, What's to keep them from messing around with the dog man or with a species making a dog man? I think there's a huge hybridization program going on right now from aliens to
Well,
on this planet.
that aside, let's be honest that evolution, whether it's divergent or parallel or convergent, happens all the time, and it's survival of the fittest, right? Um, we know for a fact that new species are being discovered every year by the dozens, and known species that have been recorded are going into extinction by the dozens. It's just a process of life. It's a process of, I mean, we could talk hybridization and all that, and that's fine too. But I'm just saying, nature has a way of, we used to have dinosaurs. We don't anymore. Why? There's reasons why this planet is constantly evolving, and species are, known to go extinct, and others are known to not so much hybridize, but morph into a stronger version of the original species in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens. It happens. It doesn't have to be alien, although all you got to do is look up and you realize that you can't beat everything around here.
A lot of people think the octopus is an alien. Speaking of camouflage, Todd and I are both divers, scuba divers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen that, haven't you, Todd?
Sure.
Octopus and cuttlefish, and they have this way to camouflage right into a rock or something. You'd never see
They're
them.
chameleons, for that matter. Terrestrial chameleons.
There used to be a song like that, didn't it?
Don't go there.
Well, you bring up an interesting point with, Bigfoot is a fairly well geographically represented phenomena across this continent. But when we start talking about other cryptids, it is interesting how certain ones in the Northeast or certain ones in Upper Peninsula Michigan. I mean, it's just crazy how diverse some of these are to certain geographical areas, I got another guest to bring on here.
Hey,
Oh my God.
Ron,
It looks like
Todd.
a dog.
how you
Well, there's
doing?
the neighborhood.
I had to pop in and just say hello. And Todd, I'm not bringing your bike to Montana. No way.
Dang it!
Maybe I'll meet you in Deadwood, South Dakota, Black Hills,
There you
Okay.
go.
That'd be fun.
somewhere like
I
that.
got that. I got that RV trailer. I can put it inside.
Oh, that'll be
double wrap it.
awesome.
Yeah.
I've got a VRBO out in the Black Hills we can use. So
Oh, there you go. I really had to come in. One thing people do not know about Ron Morehead is he is a blast to hang out with. People
What?
don't realize this guy is. I don't think I couldn't breathe, Ron, when I was around you. You're always just cracking jokes.
Does that mean I'm talking too much, taking up all the air?
I don't know.
No,
You were just
Probably gas.
you just kept me just in stitches constantly. So people don't realize Ron Morehead is a blast to hang out
Well, I
with.
think you have to have fun with all this. If you don't
Yeah.
have fun, that's what I like.
Absolutely,
Life. Yeah.
absolutely.
I think
And I've
we're
never met Todd in person, but we've been talking on the phone. Once again, we get on the phone. We're on the phone till what,
Yeah.
3, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning
Yeah,
sometimes.
pretty much.
Yeah, it's been bad. So don't call Todd late, because
No.
do not do that. But anyway, it's been a great show, Jeff.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been-
I've realized that I want to meet Ron in person because I want to hang out in his RV for 10 or 12 hours straight and listen to all the rest of these Sierra sounds that
Oh,
nobody.
I'm sure he's got some goodies he's been holding back. Yeah. Well, the Sierra Sounds, Ron, are still the landmark, kind of like the Patterson Gimlin footage, and so we really thank you for that. And there's so
At
much
the
more
time-
that we.
At the time, Doug, we had no idea.
No,
that
I
it would
know.
evolve into something like this. We didn't know.
Yeah.
We'd have treated things a lot differently if we had have known.
Right. One thing I was going to mention, you guys should maybe tell the story of Al Berry, how he went up there as a skeptic to
Oh,
try
totally.
to debunk the whole thing. And I did get a chance to meet Al and hang
Oh,
out
you
with
did?
Al out at Bluff Creek. And I mean, when he tells his story, I mean, he was out to debunk you guys.
Oh, so was Ivan Sanderson thought it was a hoax.
Yeah.
Peter Byrne thought it was a hoax.
Yeah.
Al Berry thought it was a hoax. I didn't know all this until I started reading the correspondence later on when Alex.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you didn't.
But
They were trying to
tried
fool you.
every avenue they could to debunk it, but
Yeah.
it's not debunkable because it happened.
Right.
Who
Well, it
does
was
that?
funny because Al Berry got some of the recordings
Oh,
himself.
we got a
I
lot
mean,
of them. Yeah. He spent some time up there.
yeah, the skeptic.
I miss him. He passed away, in 2000.
Yeah,
10 years,
I know.
10 years ago now. Yeah, this year.
Yeah.
He
So
was a
was there a
big guy.
progression for Peter Byrne at one point, since he felt that he wanted to debunk you, and then at one point he finds himself hanging out in an RV listening to tapes? I mean, did he kind of come around to this idea?
Well,
that this
he's
is
still with
authentic?
us. I'm not sure. No, he still sets out trail cams and looks for the ape in the woods, I think. Which
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. He might get lucky,
Yeah.
but no one's got lucky yet.
But his
Roger
position on the
Patterson.
Sierra Sounds, have they changed from when?
Oh, I think what he does appreciate is me. He knows me as a person, and he knows Al
Sure.
Berry as a person, and he respects that. So he knows that we experienced something. Like so many people think we might have misinterpreted something that was
Sure.
something different.
Wasn't it Peter that that introduced you and Al? Or did you already know each other?
No, he sent Al down to interview us in the valley.
Yeah,
San Joaquin Valley, from a
And
letter.
then you had that connection with geology too.
He's a geologist. Al Berry was
Yeah.
a master's degree,
And
master's
you're
in
a
science.
gold miner, so
Yeah, well,
There's
he got me involved in a couple things there. Well, you make a small fortune in gold mines, put a large fortune in it. That's what I learned.
Well, you and Al became great friends. I mean, you were
Yeah,
ended up friends forever.
yeah. We passed his ashes over down by Mount Shasta, actually.
Wow.
His son and I, Greg's a neat kid. His son, and he works for. He's an engineer in the studios down in Southern California. He goes all over the world. Set engineer for movie studios, and he took me onto a set of the Terminator down there. He was working on. He set up a lot of stuff there, and he done several films. You'd appreciate it, Doug. Yeah.
Well, how in the world did you get? You had Jonathan Frakes, didn't you? And he narrates your DVD.
Yeah.
And I don't know how in the world you scored him to do that, but
I paid him a lot of money.
that's how. Okay.
That works. That's how it works.
I believe
That
you lost
usually
your
does
ass.
work.
He did a good job. He
He had a good voice. He was pretty hot at the time when we produced that, and I got the studios down in Burbank and flew him in from back here somewhere, and he spent about 3 or 4 hours in the studio with us and walked away with a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, you got the voice, man. You got that
That's why I did.
voice.
That's why I narrated the second CD. Everybody said, "Why don't you just narrate?"
I
it?"
had
So,
somebody tell
Yeah.
me today, I want you to tell Ron Morehead that if I write a biography, I want him to narrate it. That's what a friend of mine told me today. So,
Yeah, Ron, you have the golden voice. It's amazing.
well, thank you, Doug. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So anyhow, I'm gonna skip out. I didn't want to screw up your show here. I don't
well,
even
you
know.
didn't. We were probably going to be looking at circling the airport here and landing this thing. So
Yeah, I'm ready.
maybe buzz the tower quick before we put it on the ground. But
And Ron, do you still fly? Or did you
I
give
haven't.
that
I
up?
sold my airplanes, and I haven't been flying since. I didn't figure I needed them anymore. Now I miss them. One of them anyway. I'd just like to have. I sold my big twin engine to a guy in Russia who crashed it.
Oh no!
Yeah.
I'll build you an electric paraglider, Ron, and you can use that.
I had one of those, Doug. The banks made me
Oh.
get rid of it because it was an experimental airplane.
Oh,
But I flew
geez.
that into meets all over California. I buzzed skiers. on the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It was a
you
power
could
glider made by Don Mitchell, the guy who invented the Well, he worked for Northrop.
Yeah, but I'll build you an electric one so it doesn't make any noise.
That'd be scary.
It'll be it'll have we'll use drill batteries for a Walmart. Drill batteries. And just plug those in.
Wait, you might be onto something there, Doug. Because we have to use these little engines now, and I know I used to have a hang glider too. I used to hang glide.
Jeez.
I crashed head on. That's why I'm getting taller I am.
If you could build it with one of your e-bikes is what you sit on with it, the stuff mounted to it, and then you could disconnect it once you get to where you want to go and use the e-bike.
Don't encourage him.
There's people
It's
doing
all about
that,
weight.
actually.
It's all about weight and thrust and lift, and you gotta get all that stuff right.
But I met a guy who's he's been building electric paragliders.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Come on out, let's go." And we're me and Blaine are thinking about it.
That's where the future is going. It really is. I mean,
yeah.
But
it would be a great research tool, except for those damn nasty trees. It wouldn't be fun to get hung up with the chute on a.
They jump up and bite you.
That whole gravity thing.
Yeah, the gravity gets to me a little more than.
Oh, man.
Well, I'm working on something now, anti-gravity. It's one of
Lord.
In my book, my new book I'm writing. So levitation, how it happens.
I prefer Uncle Gravity.
I seen a film of a monk actually levitating, and no tricks. I mean, I've seen the poles, all that stuff, but this was no trick. This was actual monk in Tibet. And then reading the stories about these monks who levitate boulders in Tibet with sound. It's all done with sound frequency, and I got a whole nother chapter on sound too in my book. How sound, and I think that's how they did the megalithic structures in Nepal and Peru and Egypt and all those things. Because they can't lift those boulders like that. I mean, not with sheer labor.
Well, sure. I mean, you can. I was just going to say, you can take small objects and lift them with sound. So all you got to do is scale it up.
I think everybody's seen the video that's been out there for a long time of a speaker using vibration and sound to levitate plastic beads off of it. So, I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah. Well, they say, sound will turn into light at the 40th octave. And that's kind of interesting. Anyway, it's a pretty interesting subject to get into what's really going on around us. How things work. How things actually work.
Well, Ron, if we can get you on Untold one of these days, that'd be a blast. So
sure.
And
well, you know what I do? I just wait for an invitation.
We'll get you on. We'll get you on.
Okay.
All right. We'll say goodbye. Good night, Jeff. Great show. Goodbye, Todd.
You bet. Thanks for popping
We'll
in,
talk
Doug.
soon. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you two guys joining us. And like Ron, like you pointed out, you're on the East Coast. It's getting late there. It's almost tomorrow. So, know, it won't be in too long. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out to do
Thanks for having us.
Really
It was fun. I enjoyed this.
Always fun.
I hope everybody appreciated the conversation too. Like I say, I really felt, the more I talked to Todd about the time that you guys have spent together, that I just felt like this shouldn't be a typical interview. This really should be more of just a kickback, casual discussion, and I hope everybody appreciated that. So,
well, I was hoping you had that fourth screen with just a video of a campfire going.
Well, I thought about that actually, but I was gonna change the whole background here to that, but I didn't know. Cool. My boss Doug Hychek, he might have got on me about not having the right background on.
Some of the best stories we got, any of us, is around the fire.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Right. There you go.
Some of the worst.
Somebody asked me, he said, well, what are you guys going to talk about? I said, listen, if we come with this campfire mentality, some people might hear stuff that they've never heard before. And here we are talking about there's 10 or 12 hours of the Sierra sounds that only a few, little fraction of it.
Well, you figure we recorded those things from 71 all the way through 76. So
yeah. I would imagine that you've got quite a collection of stuff that just simply hasn't been heard by the public, and it would be interesting if we ever reach a point to where you felt like putting out. it'd be kind of neat to see. So,
Well, again, I think we cherry picked the good ones for the CDs and the books.
yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you look at the work that Scott Nelson did with what you released, and the way that he broke down that over 600 phonetics from it. I mean, obviously, it was a pretty good representation of what you guys had been hearing. So,
yeah, he's going to present that at 1st of April at
Florida.
Where is it? With me, I'll be there too. Hamlet.
yeah. Cool.
Anyway, just thought I'd say that because we don't speak together that often because we're so far apart. And he's, like I say, he's retired. He got a beard down to here now. And anyway, I'm retired too, but I don't want my beard to wear off.
Well, if you guys want to hang out backstage just for a minute, I know you guys it's getting late and you got to run, but if you hang out for a minute, I'll end the show and I'd love to say goodbye to you. So,
all right.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys. Well, I tell you, that was an interesting show. It's so great having both of them here together. And I really, really am intrigued by the amount of recordings they actually have. I had a feeling that was the case. That there were way more than what was released, and to actually hear it confirmed, that I find that really intriguing. Just imagine what you guys have heard on the Sierra Sounds. There's 10 or 12 hours of that on audio cassettes. So hopefully we reach a point where that can be shared. It'll be really interesting to see what Harrington and Carpenter come up with, having Scott Nelson look at the audio recording that they recently recorded. If there are similarities drawn to the Sierra Sounds, I think that's going to be fascinating if that's the case. But I appreciate you guys all coming in here on a Monday night, once again, joining us here on Pine Island Research. We will see you next week. Monday morning, we'll do coffee time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And then we will see you back here next week on Monday night here on Pine Island Research.